This is Death by Easter Hunt, a hilarious feel-good cozy mystery, Island Whodunit Book 26, written by Tess Marlowe and narrated by Sarah.
Hi, Tess Marlowe here. Before Chapter 1 begins, please take 1 second to look at your screen and hit subscribe. It helps me bring you more free cozy mysteries.
Chapter 1. Gary, is that a metal detector? Alex asked, pausing with her wine glass halfway to her mouth. The wooden gate squeaked on its hinges. Gary marched up the path, completely illuminated by the blinding military-grade LED headlamp strapped to his forehead. He was wearing heavy tactical boots, a khaki cargo vest that seemed to be made entirely of zippers, and indeed, he was carrying a long yellow metal detector. Bombay, who had been enjoying a peaceful Easter Eve nap on the grass, opened one eye, let out a deep, judgmental sigh, and went back to sleep. "It's a Fisher F-44 Advanced Visual and Audio Target ID metal detector," Gary announced, stepping onto the porch and clicking off his headlamp. "And yes, it's waterproof up to 10 feet in case you were wondering." "We weren't," Reg said from his favorite chair, his legs propped up on the railing, "but I am wondering why you look like you're about to invade a public beach at 11:40 at night." "Do you guys even live on this island?" Gary asked, looking at the group in utter disbelief. He unclipped a small plastic shovel from his belt and set it on the patio table next to Mendoza's beer. "Do you watch the news at all?" Mendoza eyed the shovel. "Gary, if you are going treasure hunting again, I am going to arrest you for preemptive public nuisance." "Why's that?" "Do you remember what happened the last time you went on an island-wide treasure hunt?" Shannon asked, leaning forward. "That was a pirate map given to me by a literal hermit, Shannon," Gary said defensively. "Totally different demographic." "You found him dead in his hut," Reg pointed out. "It's completely different this time," Gary insisted, waving his hands. "Arthur Sterling is a billionaire hotel mogul, not a hermit. Nobody's going to die. Val and I are just going to find the golden egg and buy her a whole fleet of boats and maybe a cruise ship. I don't know how much they cost." Lucien, who was sitting next to Shannon, stopped scrolling on his phone. "Did you just say Arthur Sterling?" "Yes." Gary threw his hands up in validation. "Thank you, Lucien. Finally someone who follows the island news." "I really try not to," Lucien muttered. "But Arthur Sterling is the guy who owns 4 of the biggest luxury resorts on San Malvino." "Exactly. He's a gazillionaire, and he made an official announcement on all the local channels 2 hours ago," Gary said, pulling his smartphone out of one of his 14 pockets. In the true spirit of the Easter holiday, Arthur Sterling has prepared an island-wide adventure. He hid a solid gold Easter egg somewhere on San Malvino. Alex tilted her head. "And you bought a $500 metal detector to find gold?" "First, I already had the detector. Second, it's not about the gold," Gary said, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated treasure hunter fever. "It's about what's inside the gold. Sterling put a no-limit black credit card inside the egg, preloaded with exactly half of his entire worldly fortune." "Ka-ching!" Polly screeched from his shoulder. Silence fell over the porch. The only sound was the distant chirping of the geckos. Reg slowly lowered his legs from the railing. "Half his fortune." "We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars," Gary nodded gravely. "I bet it's another marketing stunt," Rafa said, picking up his beer. "He's going to drop clues that force thousands of people to run through his hotel lobbies, buy his $15 cocktails, and generate millions in free social media coverage. The egg is probably sitting in a glass case in the Sterling Resort penthouse." "It's not a stunt," Gary said, tapping his phone screen and shoving it toward the center of the table. "Look at him. Does this look like a guy trying to sell margaritas?" The group leaned in. Arthur Sterling, a sharply dressed man in his late 70s with silver hair and hollow, intense eyes, stood in front of the stained glass windows of the island's oldest church. He didn't look like a smug billionaire. He looked exhausted. "The wealth of this world is a heavy, corrupting anchor," Sterling said in the video, his voice echoing slightly in the empty church courtyard. "We build our empires, but we forget the community that sustains us. I have realized, perhaps too late, that money unchecked is a poison. Therefore, in the spirit of resurrection and renewal, I am giving it back to the island." Alex frowned. Sounds like he's afraid of something. 3 clues, Sterling continued, staring directly into the camera lens. Rooted in scripture, grounded in our island's history. Midnight tonight the hunt begins. Whoever holds the egg holds the future. May God guide your hands. The video cut to black. See? Gary said, snatching the phone back. He's dead serious. Val and I have been mapping out all the historical churches and religious landmarks for the last hour. She's waiting for me down by the marina with a crowbar and 2 thermoses of coffee. Mendoza stared at the blank screen of Gary's phone for 3 agonizingly long seconds. Then she slowly reached up and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Angie?" Rafa asked cautiously from his spot leaning against the doorframe. "You okay?" "Lucien," Mendoza said, her voice dropping into a terrifyingly calm, flat monotone. "Yes, boss?" "Go home, get your badge, your gun, and your handcuffs, then go to the station and put on the biggest pot of coffee we own." "Now? Why?" Lucien moaned. "It's Easter Eve. Shannon bought me a chocolate bunny with my name on it. Tomorrow we're putting on fancy clothes and going to church." "Celebrations are canceled." Mendoza completely ignored him. "Call everyone in the department. Let them know they got approved overtime." Gary blinked. "Is it illegal to hunt for Easter eggs?" "It is not an egg hunt, Gary," Mendoza snapped. "It is a mass hysteria event fueled by hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you know what perfectly reasonable, law-abiding adults do when you tell them there is a limitless black card hidden in the dirt? They buy metal detectors?" Gary offered unhelpfully. "They buy shovels," Mendoza said. "By 1 o'clock in the morning, people are going to be digging up the public parks. They are going to take pickaxes to the botanical gardens. They are going to tear apart the Heritage Center's flower beds, trespass on private property, and start fistfights in church courtyards." "She's not wrong," Reg winced. "It's going to be the purge with pastel colors." Lucien groaned loudly, letting his head fall back against the porch railing. "Why do people have to turn every holiday into a chaotic spectacle? This island thrives on drama." "Drama queen!" Polly circled over Lucien's head. "It's not drama, it's an adventure," Gary corrected, adjusting the collar of his tactical vest. "And Val and I are going to win it fair and square. We've got a system." "Your system is a toy shovel and a metal detector," Reg pointed out. "If the egg is solid gold, a metal detector will pick it up. But if he buried it under the foundation of a historical building, you're going to need a jackhammer." "Don't give him ideas, Reg," Mendoza warned. "I swear to God, if I catch you out there digging up the town square, I will arrest you myself." "I'm not digging up anything until we get the first clue," Gary said, completely unbothered. "Maybe it's hidden somewhere above the ground." "You know, Arthur Sterling's behavior is pretty suspicious," Alex said, watching Mendoza pace the porch. "He didn't announce it weeks in advance. He dropped it at 10 o'clock at night on a holiday weekend. He's intentionally manufacturing chaos. It's almost as if he wants the island to be distracted." Rafa tilted his head. "Distracted from what?" "That's the multi-million-dollar question," Reg said. Gary suddenly gasped. The sound was so loud and dramatic that Bombay actually lifted his head from the grass, letting out a low, confused woof. "What?" Shannon asked, leaning forward. "Did Val text you?" "No," Gary said, staring down at his phone screen. "It's midnight. Sterling just posted the first clue." The porch went completely still. Even Mendoza stopped pacing. "Well?" Reg asked, breaking the silence. "Are you going to read it, or are you just going to stand there looking like you saw a ghost?" Gary cleared his throat and read the text aloud. "The wealth of kings will turn to rust, all earthly empires fade to dust. To find the prize that you desire, seek not the tallest, grandest spire. Go where the rushing water breaks, before the second bell awakes. The shepherd guards the least of these, where salt-worn roots meet quiet seas." "Where salt-worn roots meet quiet seas?" Lucien echoed, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. "What does that even mean?" Mendoza closed her eyes. "It means," she said grimly, "that by sunrise this entire island is going to be a disaster zone." Chapter 2. Easter morning on San Malvino was usually a peaceful occasion with distant church bells, tropical birds, and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. Today, it sounded like a construction site. Alex stood near the porch railing, holding a steaming mug of coffee, listening to a faint, rhythmic thumping echoing from the direction of the resort quarter. "Do you hear that?" she asked. "Sounds like a backhoe," Reg said, taking a sip of Island Strong. "It's Easter Sunday," Alex frowned. "There shouldn't be any construction going." "That's probably the treasure hunters breaking things," Reg said calmly. At the bottom of the porch steps, Bombay lifted his large, furry head from the grass, his ears swiveling toward the squeak of the garden gate, and let out a low, inquisitive woof. Mendoza pushed the gate open and marched up the path. She looked like she had just survived a trench war. Her pants were soaked to the knees, her boots were caked in thick gray mud, and her hair was plastered to her forehead. Right behind her, Lucien dragged his feet up the walkway soaking wet, with a single damp lily pad stuck to his left shoulder. Mendoza climbed the porch steps, walked straight past Reg and Alex, and dropped into the nearest chair. "Coffee?" Mendoza said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. Alex didn't say a word. She quickly went into the kitchen, returning a moment later with 2 large mugs. "Rough night?" Reg asked, eyeing the San Malvino's finest. "I was assaulted by a choir director," Lucien whispered, gripping his coffee mug like a lifeline. "She hit me in the shin with a plastic gardening trowel. I think it's bruised." "I warned you." Mendoza took a long, desperate sip. "I warned all of you. But did anyone listen?" "No. It's an adventure," Gary said. "It'll be fun," Gary said. "Where exactly did you guys end up?" Alex asked, pulling up a chair. "The Twin Bells Resort and Casino," Lucien groaned, peeling the lily pad off his shoulder and dropping it onto the deck in disgust. The riddle mentioned the Wealth of Kings and tallest, grandest spire, so naturally, half the island immediately assumed Arthur Sterling hid the golden egg at his own flagship casino. Alex winced. The glass high-rise with the massive dancing water fountain in the front plaza? "Exactly," Mendoza said grimly. "By 1:30 in the morning, there were 300 people wading through the fountain. They completely destroyed the landscaping and ripped up the decorative lighting. Some guy brought a sledgehammer and tried to crack open the marble mermaid statue in the center." "Let me guess," Reg said with a grin. "Gary and Val were there." "Gary and Val were waist-deep in the water," Mendoza confirmed, rubbing her temples. "Gary was swinging that massive yellow metal detector back and forth like a scythe, yelling at people to stay out of his grid. Val was actively fighting off 2 tourists who tried to steal her crowbar." "Did they find anything?" Reg asked. "They found 3 quarters, a soggy casino chip and a rusted spark plug," Lucien said miserably. "And then the casino manager called us for trespassing and property damage." Mendoza set her mug down on the table with a heavy thud. "My holding cells are full, completely packed. I had to call Warden Patino at 4 in the morning." Reg raised an eyebrow. "You sent them to Legoland?" "I shipped a busload of PTA moms, local businessmen, and tourists straight to his cell blocks. I am out of patience, I am out of coffee, and I am out of holding cells," Mendoza said, pushing her empty mug toward Alex for a refill. "It's mass hysteria," Lucien moaned. "I haven't slept, I haven't showered, and my chocolate bunny is still sitting on the kitchen counter waiting for me." Before anyone could offer Lucien their sympathies, the garden gate banged open and Shannon, still in her pajamas, burst onto the porch. "You guys!" Shannon yelled, completely ignoring her muddy, traumatized boyfriend. "Did you see it? Have you seen the news?" Lucien squeezed his eyes shut. "Shannon, please tell me Arthur Sterling didn't drop the second clue. If I have to go defend another fountain, I'm quitting the force." "It's not a clue," Shannon said, her eyes wide as she practically shoved the phone into the center of the group. "Arthur Sterling is dead." Reg sat forward, all traces of amusement vanishing from his face. "What?" "I just got the notification from the San Malvino Tribune," Shannon said, her fingers flying across the screen as she read the article aloud. An official press release from Sterling Hospitality Group. It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of our visionary founder, Arthur Sterling. Mr. Sterling passed away peacefully in his sleep early this morning at his private estate. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. No one spoke for 3 long seconds. People don't die peacefully 8 hours after detonating a financial bomb like that, Reg said. That's what the PR statement says, Shannon shrugged. Peacefully, my foot. Mendoza shot up from the chair. The man was in his 70s and perfectly healthy. He was energetic enough to record a cryptic, highly produced video at midnight. And exactly 8 hours after he announced to the world that he's giving away half his net worth in a chaotic scavenger hunt, his heart just coincidentally stops? You think someone got to him? Alex asked. Of course someone got to him, Mendoza snapped, pacing the length of the porch. Sterling knew exactly what he was doing last night. I bet he dropped that video on a holiday weekend without warning his PR team, his lawyers, or his family. It was a rogue move. So you think someone tried to get ahead of the madness, Reg said, nodding slowly. Think about it. Mendoza stopped pacing and looked at them. Some heir, some board member, or some disgruntled spouse watched that midnight broadcast and realized their massive inheritance was currently buried under a bush somewhere on this island. They panicked. They probably confronted him and killed him to stop the fortune from being given away. And now they're using the treasure hunt as a smokescreen, Lukian realized, his eyes widening. The whole island is distracted. We are busy arresting choir directors and fountains. It's the perfect time to cover up a murder. Exactly, Mendoza said grimly. And I'm sure they have a very expensive doctor and a very expensive lawyer on retainer to make it look peaceful. Shannon frowned, looking at her phone. But if Sterling is dead, does that mean the treasure hunt is cancelled? The golden egg is still out there, Reg pointed out smoothly. A PR statement doesn't magically unbury it. The hunt is only going to get worse now. People will think it's his dying wish. Mendoza swore quietly under her breath and turned to Lucienne. Lucienne, get up. We are going to the Sterling estate. We are? Lucienne asked, scrambling to his feet, wincing as he put weight on his bruised shin. Yes, I am going to see the body. Get Crane on the autopsy, and if there's even a sliver of suspicion that Sterling's death was not natural or peaceful force, a homicide investigation down his expensive lawyers' throats before they can cremate the evidence. I bet you got an assignment for us too, Detective? Reg asked, taking a sip of his coffee. End this madness, Mendoza said, looking at them. I cannot investigate a possible homicide while this island is actively destroying itself. I need the prize found, and I need this circus shut down today. You want us to find the golden egg? Alex raised an eyebrow. I want you to solve the darn riddle, Mendoza corrected. You have the brains. Figure out where the egg actually is. Reg offered a faint, mischievous smile. Are you officially deputizing us as treasure hunters, Angela? Call it whatever you want, just find that egg. She reached into her damp pocket, pulled out her smartphone, quickly dialed a number, and put it on speakerphone. It rang twice before a groggy, sleep-heavy voice answered. Angie, it is Easter Sunday. Rafa's voice groaned through the speaker. If you are calling to tell me you arrested Gary, I am not paying his bail. Gary is fine, Mendoza said briskly. Wake up and get your nerdy butt over to Alex and Reggie's porch right now. Why? Rafa sighed. Arthur Sterling is dead. I need you to solve that riddle. Chapter 3. Every time I think this island has reached peak insanity, Rafa said, pushing the wooden garden gate open, it actively goes out of its way to prove me wrong. Good morning to you too, Raphael, Alex said, sliding a fresh, steaming mug of black coffee across the patio table. Rafa dropped into the chair Mendoza had vacated 10 minutes ago and took a long, desperate sip. Have you heard from Gary? According to Mendoza, he was swinging his metal detector like a battle axe last night in a casino fountain. Reg rolled his eyes. That sounds exactly like him. So what's our plan? Shannon asked. How do we decode a weird riddle? What do we actually know about Arthur Sterling, aside from the fact that he is a hotel mogul? Rafa asked, taking a sip. We need to know what kind of person he was to figure out what he meant in his clue. Let's find out, Shannon said, her fingers already flying across the screen of her phone. Give me 10 seconds. Bombay, stretched out in a sunbeam on the lawn, let out a soft snore, entirely unbothered by the island-wide chaos. Okay, here we go, Shannon announced, her eyes darting across a Wikipedia page. Arthur Sterling, 78 years old, founder and CEO of Sterling Hospitality, net worth somewhere in the ballpark of $1 billion. Skip the financials, Rafa said. Look at his personal life, his daily habits. Shannon swiped to a new tab, pulling up his official social media accounts and a few local news articles. Well, he's a widower, no children, but he's rather religious. Look at this. Over the last 5 years, he's completely stepped back from the daily operations of his hotels. He handed the reins over to his board of directors. Almost all of his public appearances lately have been at Nuestra Señora de las Olas. Our Lady of the Sea, Alex said. The big Catholic church on the east side of the island. He's a major benefactor, Shannon nodded. He funded the restoration of their stained glass windows last year. And according to his assistant's interviews, he attends morning mass almost every single day. He's deeply, deeply devout. And deeply paranoid, Reg added. Remember how terrified he looked on that video? I bet he knew someone was coming for him. If he hid half his fortune on a card, he wouldn't bury it at a casino where his corporate board could easily find it. He'd hide it somewhere that meant something to him personally. Let's read the riddle again. Rafa set his coffee down and picked up the paper. The wealth of kings will turn to rust, all earthly empires fade to dust. To find the prize that you desire, seek not the tallest, grandest spire. Go where the rushing water breaks, before the second bell awakes. The shepherd guards the least of these, where salt-worn roots meet quiet seas. Rafa stared at the words for a long moment. Then he looked up at the group. And the entire island read this and immediately went to dig up a casino? It's Sterling's flagship beachfront property, Alex pointed out. It's very tall and the word wealth is right there in the first line. It has absolutely nothing to do with a casino, Rafa said flatly, tossing the paper back onto the table. People are reading the word wealth and ignoring the rest of the sentence. The wealth of kings will turn to rust. He's literally telling them that earthly money is worthless. It's a classic theological rejection of materialism. Shannon leaned forward, her eyes lighting up. So it's a religious riddle? It reads exactly like scripture, Rafa nodded. Look at the last sentence. The shepherd guards the least of these, where salt-worn roots meet quiet seas. In Catholic theology, who is the shepherd of the vulnerable? Who protects the absolute lowest, most defenseless creatures on earth? Alex frowned, thinking, Jesus. Too broad, Rafa shook his head. Sterling is being specific. The least of these usually refers to the poor, the sick, or animals. The patron saint of the poor and of animals is Saint Francis of Assisi. Saint Francis, Reg repeated, the gears turning in his mind. Is there a church named after St. Francis on San Malvino? Shannon typed furiously into her phone. She frowned. No. There's Our Lady of the Sea, St. Jude's in the town square, and a couple of non-denominational chapels near the resorts. No St. Francis. There has to be, Rafa insisted. The clue is too deliberate. A shepherd, a bell ringing twice, water speaking first. It's a physical location tied to St. Francis. Alex stared at the wooden floorboards of the porch. Her eyes slowly widened as a memory clicked into place. Hold on a minute, she said, her voice rising with sudden excitement. It's not a church, not anymore. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and quickly dialed a number and hit the speaker button. It rang 3 times before a breathless voice answered. San Malvino Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Reyna speaking, the voice answered, followed by a chorus of barks. Hold still, you little menaces. Dr. Reyna, it's Alex Romanoff. Oh, hi, Alex. Sorry, it's a madhouse this morning. Vaccination day. Tell me Bombay didn't eat too much shrimp again. Bombay is perfectly fine, Dr. Reyna. Alex smiled, glancing down at the sleeping dog. We just have a very quick historical question. It's about Miguel's animal shelter. The shelter? Dr. Reyna asked, her tone shifting to confusion. What about it? Do you happen to know the history of the grounds the shelter was built on? The buildings are pretty old. Oh, sure, Dr. Reyna said, yelling over the barks. It used to be a coastal mission built by Spanish monks in the 18th century, the Misión de San Francisco. That's why the city gave it away to the shelter. They thought it would be a good fit. Rafa shot up from his chair, pointing triumphantly at the phone. St. Francis! Wait, Reg said, leaning closer to the phone. Dr. Reyna, is there a bell tower on the property? There is, she confirmed. It's right on the edge, behind the main administrative building where Miguel keeps his office, right by the beach. Go where the rushing water breaks, before the second bell awakes, Rafa whispered, a grin spreading across his face. The crashing of the waves is so close and loud, it literally drowns out the first strike of the bell. You only ever hear the second and third rings. Alex, why are you asking me about the shelter's bell tower? Dr. Reyna asked, a sudden note of suspicion creeping into her voice. Please don't tell me this has something to do with that ridiculous billionaire treasure hunt. We'll explain later, Dr. Reyna, Alex promised. Thank you. You're a lifesaver. So Sterling hid the second clue to his fortune somewhere on the grounds of Miguel's animal shelter? Reggie asked. And Miguel currently has 50 rescue dogs on that property, Shannon gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. If the internet decodes this riddle and that mob from the casino figures it out, they're going to show up with pickaxes and completely destroy the facility. We have to call Angela, Rafa said, already pulling his phone out. We have to get police tape around that shelter before the treasure hunters realize they're digging up the wrong place. Rafa hit the speed dial. Tell me you solved it, Rafa, Mendoza said over the speaker. Because I am currently driving past a man who is trying to uproot a municipal palm tree with a crowbar. We cracked it, Angie, Rafa said quickly. It has nothing to do with the casino. Sterling hid the second clue at the San Malvino animal shelter. It's built on the old St. Francis mission. We need to get over there and secure the perimeter before the mob figures it out and tramples Miguel's dogs. Go straight to the shelter, Mendoza said, the sound of the siren abruptly cutting off as her cruiser came to a stop. Lucian and I are pulling up to the main gates of the Sterling estate right now. I'll join you after I figure out what happened to Arthur. Chapter 4. The Sterling estate sat on a manicured bluff overlooking the ocean, completely isolated from the pastel-colored chaos engulfing the rest of San Malvino. Mendoza parked the cruiser at the end of the sweeping circular driveway. There were no treasure hunters here, just huge iron gates, private security cameras, and a very tense standoff taking place on the grand front steps. A broad-shouldered man in a black cassock was arguing with two men in expensive suits. The priest had the weathered, sun-beaten face of a man who'd spent the first half of his life hauling fishing nets, and his booming voice carried easily across the lawn. I don't care what the board of directors wants, Father Diego said, crossing his thick arms. Arthur was a devout man, and he is my parishioner. I am going in there to deliver his last rites. This is a private residence, Father. The slick, sharp-featured man adjusted his silk tie. Mr. Sterling passed away peacefully in his sleep. We are handling the arrangements internally to avoid a media circus. Is there a problem here? Mendoza asked, approaching them. The slick man turned and took in Mendoza's mud-splattered uniform and the gold shield clipped to her belt. Detective, I am Preston Vance, legal counsel for Sterling Hospitality, and this is Dr. Aris, Arthur's private physician. The doctor, a pale, nervous-looking man clutching a leather medical bag, gave a jerky nod. We appreciate the police response, Vance continued smoothly, but it's entirely unnecessary. As Dr. Aris has already certified, Arthur suffered a natural cardiac event in his sleep. There is no foul play. We are simply waiting for the private mortuary transport. Mendoza stopped at the top step, completely blocking the doorway. She looked at Vance, then at the sweating doctor, and finally at Father Diego. "Father," Mendoza said respectfully, "you knew Arthur well?" "I've known him for 15 years, Detective," Father Diego said, his eyes flashing with frustration. "He was at Mass yesterday morning. He was perfectly healthy, and now this suit is telling me I can't go in there to pray for his soul?" "Mr. Vance," Mendoza said, her voice dropping into a dangerously calm register. "Arthur Sterling had no living relatives, no spouse, and no children. Under San Malvino law, the unattended death of an individual with no next of kin within the residence legally requires a determination of cause by the medical examiner. A private physician cannot sign it away." Vance stiffened. "Detective, I assure you—" "Furthermore," Mendoza interrupted, stepping into Vance's personal space, "denying a recognized religious ritual to the deceased without a written directive from the man himself is a massive violation of his civil liberties. If you want to stand in front of a judge tomorrow and explain why you illegally barred a priest from delivering last rites, you are welcome to try. I'll alert all the press outlets to cover it." Vance's jaw clenched. The nervous doctor practically shrank behind him. "If you have nothing to hide," Mendoza said, gesturing toward the heavy oak doors, "then step back and let us through." Vance stared at her for a long, calculating moment. Finally, he stepped aside with a tight, furious smile. "Of course, Detective. See for yourself." Vance pushed open the doors, leading them into a cavernous, marble-floored foyer. 3 people were standing at the base of the grand staircase, their hushed conversation instantly dying as they saw Mendoza's badge. There was a handsome man in his early 30s, furiously typing on his phone, looking deeply hungover. Next to him stood a woman dripping in expensive jewelry, her arms crossed in deep annoyance. Finally, standing slightly apart from them, was a woman in a conservative, high-necked blouse, clutching a damp tissue to her chest. "Who are you?" Mendoza asked, her voice echoing off the marble. "And why are you in a dead man's house at 8 in the morning?" The young man shoved his phone into his pocket. "I'm Graham Vance, VP of Operations for Sterling Hospitality, and Preston's nephew. I rushed over the second I saw that insane midnight broadcast. Arthur's little Easter stunt is a PR nightmare, and it's tanking our stock price." "Arthur's money should have been distributed through proper, established channels," the bejeweled woman huffed, entirely ignoring the fact that the man was dead. "I am Vivian Thorne, director of the Sterling Foundation. All the philanthropic endeavors of Arthur always went through us. Leaving half his net worth to be dug up by commoners in the dirt is disgraceful." Mendoza's expression didn't change. She turned to the crying woman. "I'm Eleanor," the woman said, her voice trembling. "I've been Mr. Sterling's executive assistant for 20 years. I live in the guest house on the property. I brought him his chamomile tea at 10 o'clock last night. He was perfectly fine. He was drafting some emails. I can't believe he's gone." "Right," Mendoza said flatly. "Nobody leaves this estate. Lucien, stay here and log their IDs, Mr. Vance. Take me to the body." Vance led Mendoza and Father Diego up the sweeping staircase to the master suite. The bedroom was immaculate. Arthur Sterling lay in the center of a massive 4-poster bed. The silk sheets were pulled neatly up to his chest. "As I said," Vance murmured from the doorway, recovering some of his smugness. "Peacefully in his sleep." Mendoza didn't answer. She pulled a pair of blue nitrile gloves from her pocket and snapped them on. Father Diego stepped up to the edge of the bed, bowing his head. He pulled a worn wooden rosary from his pocket and began to pray softly in Latin. He reached out to gently touch Arthur's shoulder, but suddenly stopped. "Detective," Father Diego whispered, his brow furrowing, "where is his cross?" "What cross, Father?" "Arthur never took it off," Father Diego said, with absolute certainty. "It was a heavy silver crucifix on a thick chain. I gave it to him myself 10 years ago. He wore it under his shirt every single day. He wouldn't have taken it off to sleep." Mendoza leaned over the bed, carefully examining Arthur's exposed collarbone. She placed her gloved hand on Arthur's shoulder and carefully tilted him slightly to the side to inspect the back of his neck. Just below the hairline, partially hidden by the collar of his silk pajamas, was a stark, reddish-purple line. Mendoza gently lowered Arthur back onto the mattress and turned to the doorway. "A peaceful cardiac event, Dr. Aris?" Mendoza asked, her voice turning to ice. "Is that what usually causes friction burns on the back of a man's neck?" Dr. Aris swallowed hard, his face turning gray. I didn't see. Or you were asked not to look," Mendoza corrected sharply. "Consider your medical license under official review. Mr. Vance, you are going to hand over the security footage for the entire estate to my digital forensics specialist right now. The cameras in the private wing were disabled last night," Vance said quickly. "Arthur demanded absolute privacy when he recorded that video." "How convenient," Mendoza noted. "In that case, you'll surrender the servers. I am sure we'll be able to recover anything that was erased." She stepped out into the hallway and looked down over the grand balcony to the foyer below, where Graham, Vivian, and Eleanor were waiting under Lucien's watchful eye. "Listen to me very carefully," Mendoza's voice rang out. "This is now an active homicide investigation. The coroner will take possession of the body, and my uniforms will be taping off this estate. Do not leave the estate. I will be speaking to every single one of you again." Mendoza walked down the stairs, her boots clicking sharply against the marble. "Lucien, call Crane. Get uniforms up here to secure the perimeter. We have to get to the animal shelter ASAP." "The animal shelter?" Graham asked, looking bewildered. "Why?" Mendoza didn't even bother looking at him as she pushed the heavy oak front doors open. "Because I have a treasure hunt to shut down." Chapter 5. "I never realized this was an old mission," Reg said, parking the jeep near the gates of the shelter. Bombay hopped out and pranced inside, wagging his tail. "I thought there was some connection because I saw a small St. Francis figurine on Miguel's table last time," Alex said. "I'm surprised you noticed anything in that mess." They found Miguel in his office, hunched behind a huge stack of vaccination forms, with a puppy peacefully sleeping on the table next to a half-eaten muffin. "Alex! Reg!" Miguel squeaked, nearly knocking over a box of tennis balls as he stood up. "Dr. Reyna called and said you were on your way. Is something wrong?" "Hi, Miguel," Alex said, stepping carefully over a plush, squeaky carrot. "Apart from the island-wide scavenger hunt, nothing is wrong yet. We just wanted to ask you some question. Has Arthur Sterling been here recently?" Miguel blinked. "The billionaire? The guy who owns the big glass hotels?" "That's the one," Rafa said, leaning against the doorframe. "Has he visited the shelter?" "No." Miguel shook his head. "He's never been here, but this is kind of weird that you're asking about him." Shannon perked up. "Why is it weird?" Miguel moved his muffin aside, dug through a stack of papers, and produced a white, heavy stock envelope. "2 days ago, the mailman dropped this off," Miguel said, pulling a piece of paper from it. "It's a certified cashier's check from Arthur Sterling's personal bank account for $100,000. Reggie's eyebrows shot up. 100 grand? "I thought it was a scam," Miguel said, his hands fluttering nervously. "Or a prank. I was going to call the bank on Tuesday when they opened after the holiday. Who just mails $100,000 to an animal shelter without a press team taking photos?" "A man who is putting his affairs in order," Rafa murmured and looked at Reg. 2 days ago, he mailed this before he ever recorded that video. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was quietly distributing the fortune before whoever killed him could get their hands on it. "Killed him?" Miguel gasped. "Arthur Sterling is dead?" "It's already in the news, Miguel," Alex sighed. "Was there anything else in that envelope?" Just this," Miguel stammered, reaching into the pile again and pulling out a small, thick card embossed with gold foil. "I didn't understand it. I thought it was some kind of weird rich person greeting card." Rafa took the card. He looked down at the elegant, flowing handwriting. "It's not a greeting card," Rafa said, his eyes scanning the text. "It's the second clue." "What does it say?" Shannon asked, leaning over his shoulder. Rafa cleared his throat and read the rhyming verse aloud. "A kingdom of glass will shatter and fall, but a beacon of hope offers refuge to all. Seek out the fire that stands on the shore, where the lost are guided through turmoil and storm. A beacon of hope offering refuge, Reg said, crossing his arms. Do we have refugee camps on the island? Miguel, listen to me very carefully, Alex said, turning back to the shelter manager. You cannot tell anyone about that check or that poem. In fact, I need you to go lock the front gates to the shelter right now. Miguel wilted slightly, his eyes wide with panic. Lock the gates? But it's Sunday. We have 3 adoption meet and greets scheduled. Cancel them, Reg said firmly. Sterling broadcast a treasure hunt to the entire island last night. People are looking for a golden egg holding $500 million. If they figure out the first clue led here, a mob with pickaxes and shovels is going to storm your shelter. You need to lock this place down to protect the dogs. 5 minutes later, the screech of Mendoza's cruiser echoed through the courtyard. Tell me Miguel locked the gates, she said briskly as they approached. Padlocked and chained, Reg confirmed. He's currently barricading the dog runs just to be safe. How did it go at the estate? Exactly as you predicted, Mendoza said, her eyes flashing with cold satisfaction. The slick corporate lawyer and the private doctor tried to stonewall us, but Father Diego here pointed out that Sterling's heavy silver crucifix was missing from his neck. I checked the body. Someone ripped the chain off his throat with enough force to leave a friction burn. Did she threaten to arrest everyone for obstruction? Reg asked Lucien with a mischievous grin. It didn't come to that, Lucien said with a smile. They pretty much folded as soon as she said they'd be explaining to a judge why they denied Mr. Sterling last rites. Elliot is hauling the body to the morgue as we speak, Mendoza said. She gestured to the priest standing beside her. This is Father Diego. He's the parish priest at Our Lady of the Sea. He's known Arthur for 15 years. Rafa extended a hand. Rafael Cardenas, pleased to meet you. Father, Alex smiled warmly. Thank you for helping. Arthur was a good man, Father Diego said, shaking Rafa's hand. He had his flaws, like any man with too much money, but his faith was real. He didn't deserve to die a violent death. Nobody does, Reg said. We found the second clue, Rafa said. Or rather, Mr. Sterling mailed it here 2 days ago, along with a $100,000 cashier's check for the animal shelter. Father Diego's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Mendoza let out a low whistle. He mailed it? Mendoza asked. So he engineered this entire scavenger hunt to distribute his wealth before his board or his heirs could stop him. It's a dead man's switch, Reg nodded. A chaotic, highly publicized dead man's switch. The golden egg is just the final piece of the puzzle. We just need to figure out where the second clue leads so we can prevent the island from getting completely ruined by the scavengers. I think it's terrible that he knew he was going to die, Shannon sighed. Rafa handed the card to Father Diego. You knew him best, Father. I'm sure you'll decipher the riddle faster. Father Diego took the card and read the verse quietly to himself. Arthur was incredibly frustrated over the last few years. Father Diego said a few seconds later. He hated what the island was becoming. He built those massive glass luxury resorts when he was younger, but lately he couldn't stand them. He felt like the island was pouring millions of dollars into shiny new tourist traps, while completely abandoning its soul and its history. Alex tilted her head. A kingdom of glass will shatter and fall. Exactly, Father Diego nodded. He was actively fighting the local zoning board. They wanted to tear down one of the oldest maritime structures on San Malvino to build another beachfront resort. Arthur spent a fortune in legal fees trying to get it protected as a historical landmark. Seek out the fire that stands on the shore, Lucien murmured, his brow furrowing as he finally put the pieces together. Where the lost are guided through turmoil and storm. He's talking about a lighthouse. The old San Malvino lighthouse, Reg realized, his eyes widening. It sits right on the rocky point on the north shore. The sea roars against the cliffs, and it was literally built to guide lost sailors. That's it, Mendoza nodded. That's where the next clue is. And if we figured it out, it won't be long before the mob of treasure hunters figures it out too, Reg warned, looking at his watch. Mendoza turned toward her cruiser. Lucien, get in the car. I'm calling the Coast Guard to get a barricade around that lighthouse before someone tries to dismantle it brick by brick." "We're right behind you," Reggie said, already heading for the jeep. "Wait," Father Diego called out, lifting his heavy cassock as he jogged toward Mendoza's car. "I'm coming with you. Arthur was my friend. I have to make sure his fortune is in safe hands." Mendoza offered a sharp, approving smile. "Get in the back, Father." Chapter 6. Mendoza took a sharp left turn, her cruiser's tires screeching in protest against the sun-baked asphalt of the coastal highway. The siren wailed, cutting through the heavy, humid air of the Easter morning. "Watch out!" Lucien yelled, bracing both hands against the dashboard as a man on a bright yellow Vespa swerved across the center line. The man was steering with one hand. In his other hand, he was holding what appeared to be a brass divining rod. Mendoza slammed on the horn, expertly drifting the heavy police cruiser around the moped without slowing down. "If one more person crosses into my lane with a piece of gardening equipment, I am going to start using the bumper." In the back seat, Father Diego chuckled, gripping the door handle. "The island has certainly lost its mind today, Detective. I haven't seen this much chaos since the great rum shortage of 2012. "It's a nightmare, Father," Mendoza said, her eyes scanning the road ahead. "And the worst part is, Arthur Sterling knew exactly what he was doing when he started it." She glanced in the rearview mirror. "You said you've known him for 15 years? "Give or take," Father Diego said, leaning forward so his voice could be heard over the siren. "He walked into Our Lady of the Sea right after I was appointed there. He was in his early 60s then, but he looked completely lost." "Lost?" Lucien asked, twisting in his seat to look back at the priest. The guy owned half the luxury real estate in the Caribbean. How could he be lost? "Because he had done everything money could buy, and he was still bored," Father Diego said with a fond smile. "He told me he had skydived over Dubai, sailed a yacht solo across the Pacific, and eaten gold flake caviar in Paris. He had all the wealth in the world, and he was profoundly miserable." Mendoza navigated a roundabout, entirely ignoring a yield sign. "So, he came to the church looking for absolution?" "He came looking for a purpose," Father Diego corrected. "I told him that if he wanted a real thrill, he should see how regular people live their regular lives. It's the most terrifying, unpredictable, extreme sport there is. We became fast friends after that." "Did you steer him toward the charities?" Lucien asked, pulling out his phone. "I just pointed him in the right direction," Father Diego said modestly. "I told him to go to the docks and see how the real island lived." The next day, Arthur quietly paid in cash to replace the cracked outboard motors on 6 different fishing pangas. Then he went to the farmer's market, bought every single piece of fresh fruit and vegetable they had, and anonymously donated a truckload of food to the school cafeteria and the soup kitchen. Mendoza's eyes flashed to the rearview mirror. That doesn't sound like the kind of philanthropy Vivian Thorne would approve of. "The woman covered in diamonds at the estate?" Father Diego snorted in disgust. "No. Vivian is the director of the Sterling Foundation. She and the corporate board hated Arthur's stealth charity. They argued that quietly buying tomatoes for a soup kitchen or fixing a fisherman's boat didn't generate any positive PR for Sterling hospitality. They forced him to restrict his giving to high-profile, tax-deductible galas that looked good on the evening news." "And Arthur didn't like that?" Mendoza guessed. "He hated it," Father Diego said. "He wanted to help regular people not pose for magazines. So he rebelled. 3 months ago, he initiated a new corporate policy without telling the board. Every single month, he allowed 100 working-class families from the island to vacation in his hotels, eat at the Michelin star restaurants, and use the spas entirely for free." Lucien's jaw dropped. "He let 100 local families stay at the Sterling resorts for free?" "It was glorious," Father Diego grinned. "You had mechanics and fishermen doing cannonballs into the infinity pools right next to mainland millionaires. The elite tourists were horrified. Preston Vance and the board nearly had a collective aneurysm." "That explains why Preston Vance was so eager to slap a peaceful death label on him this morning," Mendoza said coldly. "What about the nephew, Graham Vance? He was furious about the stock price. "Boss, the father is right about the board," Lucien said, looking up from his phone. "I'm looking at the financial filings for Sterling Hospitality Group. The board of directors has been trying to push through a multi-billion-dollar corporate buyout with an international conglomerate for the last 6 months. It would have meant massive golden parachutes for Preston and Graham Vance and a huge payout for the Sterling Foundation." "Let me guess," Mendoza said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Arthur was against it." He knew the conglomerate would fire the local staff and bulldoze the island's history to build more glass towers, Father Diego confirmed. 2 weeks ago, Arthur used his power as chairman and majority shareholder to officially veto the buyout. He killed the deal. "And cost his board hundreds of millions of dollars," Lucien whispered. "It gets worse," Father Diego said, his tone turning dead serious. As soon as he vetoed the sale, Arthur started receiving anonymous death threats, letters shoved under his door, emails from encrypted servers. Arthur knew someone was coming for him, but he didn't know who. Mendoza swore quietly under her breath, which explains the extreme paranoia in the video. He was a dead man walking and he knew it. "But why the Easter egg hunt?" Lucien asked, turning in his seat. If he knew he was in danger, why not just write a new will and leave the money to the soup kitchen or the animal shelter directly? "Because Arthur wasn't stupid," Mendoza answered, smiling. "If he wrote a traditional will leaving $500 million to local charities, Preston Vance and a team of expensive corporate lawyers would contest it the second Arthur's heart stopped. They would claim he wasn't of sound mind. They'd tie the money up in probate court for a decade." "Exactly." Father Diego nodded, looking out the window at the passing palm trees. The scavenger hunt was Arthur's final checkmate against the board. Until the board realized what he was doing, Lucien realized. Arthur drops the video. Someone with a lot to lose sees the broadcast. They realize Arthur is actively liquidating the company's assets and giving it away to the island. "They panicked," Mendoza said coldly, her foot pressing harder on the accelerator. "It has to be Preston or Graham," Lucien said confidently. "Or Vivian. They all have millions of reasons to want him dead." "What about the assistant?" Mendoza asked, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror again. "Eleanor. She claimed she brought him chamomile tea at 10 o'clock. She lived on the property. She had the easiest access to him." Father Diego shook his head immediately. "Not Eleanor. She's a saint, detective. She's been his executive assistant for 20 years. She was the only person Arthur actually trusted." "You're sure?" Mendoza pressed. "Positive," Father Diego said. "Arthur told me she handled all his personal, off-the-books accounts so the board couldn't track his local charity donations. She loved him. She would never hurt him." "We'll see. In my experience, the people with the closest access are usually the ones with something worth hiding." "Speaking of hiding," Lucien pointed toward the windshield. "There it is." Through the front windshield, rising against the blue of the ocean, was the old San Malvino lighthouse. Chapter 7. The old San Malvino lighthouse stood on a jagged outcrop of black volcanic rock, completely surrounded by a swirling sea of pastel polo shirts, sun hats, and plastic beach shovels. Mendoza didn't even bother trying to park. She threw her cruiser into park right on the grass, slapped the police siren to give one final deafening whoop to scatter a group of tourists wielding garden trowels, and marched toward the Coast Guard barricades. "Gary?" Mendoza said, stopping with her hands on her hips. "How did you get past the Coast Guard?" "I texted Shannon," Gary said cheerfully, adjusting his tactical vest. Mendoza shot a glare at Shannon. "What?" she said, shrugging. "He's our friend, and he brought a metal detector. I figured we could use the equipment." "Fine." Mendoza rolled her eyes at them. "Just don't break anything historical." "We are strictly here in an observational capacity," Gary promised. He beamed, turning slightly to gesture to the woman with a crowbar standing next to him. "Angela, I don't think you've officially met. This is Val. Val, this is everyone." Alex and Shannon immediately stepped forward, their eyes doing a quick approving sweep of the rigger. Val was wearing her standard faded canvas overalls and heavy boots. She looked like she could single-handedly wrestle a shark, and the heavy iron crowbar resting casually on her shoulder only added to the terrifyingly competent aesthetic. Alex smiled warmly. "It's so great to finally meet you, Val. Gary talks about you all the time." To everyone's absolute surprise, the tough, salty commercial fisherwoman instantly blushed. It's really nice to meet you guys, too," Val said, her voice dropping a few decibels into something surprisingly soft and sweet. "Gary's told me so much about you. He says you're like family." "Crazy relatives," Polly squeaked. "I don't remember signing the adoption papers," Reg whispered into Alex's ear. "Well, we're thrilled you're here, Val." Shannon smiled brightly. "We're going to need all the help we can get." Before anyone could say anything else, Mendoza's phone rang. "Crane, tell me you have something." "I have a ruptured spleen, Angela. That's what I have." Crane's voice echoed through the lighthouse. "Your billionaire didn't die of a heart attack, and he didn't just pass away peacefully in his sleep." Rafa stepped closer. "He was beaten?" "Severely," Crane confirmed. "He took a targeted blow to the abdomen and died of internal bleeding. The whole peaceful death in the bed was staged." "He was interrogated," Reg said, his jaw tightening. "The killer probably wanted to know where he hid the golden egg." "God rest his soul," Father Diego said heavily, crossing himself. "Thanks, Elliot." "Send me the official report," Mendoza said, hanging up the phone and immediately grabbing the radio. "Tito," Mendoza said, "tell me the Vances, Vivian Thorne, and the assistant are still sitting in the foyer where I left them." There was a long pause on the other end of the radio. "Boss, they're gone," Tito squeaked. "They're what?" "Mr. Vance got really aggressive, boss," the uniform stammered defensively. "He was screaming about false imprisonment and civil rights lawsuits. He threatened to sue the department into bankruptcy. I was scared we'd lose our jobs." "Why didn't you radio me?" Mendoza roared. "I'm scared of you more." "This is just great," Mendoza hissed, pacing a tight circle. "The killer is one of those 4 people, and now they are loose on the island, fully aware that we are on to them." "And they are probably looking for the egg," Alex said. "If they beat Arthur to death trying to find it last night, they aren't going to stop now." "Then we have to split up," Mendoza said, pointing at the group. "You solve this riddle. Find that egg before the killer does. Lucienne, you're with me. We are going to hunt down Sterling's employees." "Be careful, Angie," Rafa warned. "If they're willing to beat an old man to death for $500 million, they aren't going to hesitate to shoot a cop." "Let them try," Mendoza said, and marched back toward her cruiser. "All right," Reg said, clapping his hands together. "We know the second clue points here. Seek out the fire that stands on the shore, where the lost are guided and the sea roars." But where exactly did he hide the next envelope? Gary proudly lifted his yellow metal detector. "Stand back, citizens. Let the professional work." Gary flipped a switch on the handle, and the machine let out a high-pitched, steady whine. He began sweeping the large circular disc over the walls of the lighthouse, moving methodically toward the heavy, iron-reinforced wooden doors. He swept the wand over a decorative stone retaining wall right next to the entrance. Beep, beep, beep. The metal detector lit up like a Christmas tree, emitting a loud, frantic alarm. "Dig it up!" Polly screeched. Gary dropped to his knees and started brushing dirt away from the base of the wall, but stopped. The beep wasn't coming from the dirt. It was coming from the wall itself. Right at eye level, bolted to the old stone, was a heavy bronze historical plaque. The old San Malvino lighthouse, restored through the generous patronage of Arthur Sterling. "It's behind the plaque," Alex realized, tracing the edge of the bronze plate. "Look at the mortar around the stones here. It's fresh. Someone chipped this out and replaced it recently." "Allow me," Val said smoothly. She stepped forward, wedging the flattened end of her crowbar directly into the fresh mortar line behind the plaque. The mortar cracked with a loud snap. The heavy bronze plaque popped loose, falling into the floor with a heavy thud, revealing a dark, hollowed-out cavity in the stone wall behind it. Rafa reached into the hole and pulled out a sealed metal tube. He unscrewed the cap and slid out a small, thick card embossed with gold foil. You two make a very efficient treasure hunting team, Shannon noted, grinning at Gary and Val. Gary puffed out his chest, looking immensely proud, while Val merely smiled and leaned on her crowbar. "Read it, Rafa," Reg said, keeping an eye on the crowds of tourists shouting on the other side of the Coast Guard barricade. "Where are we going next?" Rafa cleared his throat and read the elegant, flowing handwriting. "A feast for kings will leave the spirit cold. True wealth is found where broken men grow old. Seek out the tables where the bread is free, and dig beneath the oldest banyan tree." "This makes no sense," Rafa said, confused. "Banyan trees don't grow in the Caribbean." "There is exactly one on the island. I know where it is," Gary yelled, pointing enthusiastically at the card. "I know exactly where that is. I once made a whole YouTube episode about it." "Where?" Alex asked. "The community soup kitchen," Gary said, already turning to sprint toward Val's car. "It's in the courtyard of the old parish. There's a massive 200-year-old banyan tree right in the middle of the garden." "The table's where the bread is free," Rafa murmured, a grin spreading across his face. "Arthur, you brilliant man, let's go." Chapter 8. "Please tell me we have a plan," Lucien said, his voice bouncing as the cruiser hit a pothole. "How are we supposed to find 3 highly paid corporate executives who already know we're coming for them? They could be anywhere on the island by now." "We're not going to chase the executives, Lucien," Mendoza said, her eyes fixed on the winding coastal road. "They'll just stonewall us, and we don't have enough physical evidence to hold them yet. We squeezed the weak link." Father Diego leaned forward from the back seat. "The doctor." "Exactly," Mendoza nodded, taking a sharp turn. "Dr. Aris doesn't have the backing of the Sterling corporate board. He's just a private physician with a lucrative practice. Right now, he is terrified of losing his medical license, and he knows Crane is currently conducting an autopsy on the body he signed off on. He's going to run." "Where is his office?" Lucien asked, pulling out his phone. "Look it up," Mendoza ordered. "And while you're at it, call the Port Authority. Tell them I want every private jet, helicopter, and yacht registered to Sterling Hospitality or its subsidiaries grounded immediately. Nobody leaves this island without my personal authorization." "Copy that," Lucien said, his thumbs flying across the screen. "Okay, found him. Dr. Aris operates out of the Panorama office building. It's on the West Cliffs." Mendoza hit the siren to clear a pack of teenagers carrying shovels out of the intersection. "Hold on tight." 10 minutes later, the cruiser screeched to a halt in front of the Panorama office building. Perched elegantly on the cliffs overlooking a sparkling turquoise bay, the facility looked less like a traditional medical complex and more like an exclusive, ultra-expensive boutique retreat for the island's elite. Mendoza, Lucien, and Father Diego pushed through the heavy glass double doors. The gleaming lobby was a masterclass in sterile luxury. The air was heavily air-conditioned and smelled faintly of eucalyptus. Tall glass vases filled with fresh white hydrangeas lined the walls. A discreet instrumental version of New York State of Mind floated through invisible overhead speakers. Behind the marble desk sat the same 2 receptionists, wearing matching pastel blouses. The moment they saw Mendoza, their professional, serene smiles vanished, replaced instantly by a look of synchronized, unfiltered glee. "Detective Mendoza!" The receptionist with the sleek bun gasped, leaning over the desk. "Are we having another high-stakes investigation? Did Andres Vega come back? We haven't seen his red SUV all month." "No celebrities today, ladies," Mendoza said briskly, resting her hands on the edge of the marble counter. "I need to see Dr. Aris, right now." The receptionist with the loose curls gave a disappointed, dramatic pout. "Oh, detective, you just missed him. He was only here for about 5 minutes." Mendoza's jaw tightened. "Where did he go?" "We're not sure," Sleek Bun whispered, leaning in as if sharing a state secret. "But he looked absolutely terrible. He was sweating right through his designer shirt. He ran into his office, packed a leather duffel bag, and practically sprinted out the private side entrance." "The one without the security cameras," Lucien noted. "Exactly." Loose Curls nodded enthusiastically. "We thought it was so strange. Usually he only uses that door for high-profile patients who want discretion. But today, He just grabbed his girlfriend and bolted. Mendoza froze. His girlfriend? Yes. Sleekbun smiled warmly. Such a sweet woman. She doesn't usually come to the office, but she was waiting for him in the lobby today. Eleanor. She works as an executive assistant over at the Sterling estate. Behind Mendoza, Father Diego let out a sharp, breathless exhale, as if he had just been punched in the stomach. Eleanor, the priest whispered, his weathered face turning gray. 15 years I've known that woman. She sat in the front pew of my church, and I had absolutely no idea. So it wasn't just a corporate conspiracy, Mendoza said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous murmur. It was an inside job. Vance, Vivian, and the board wanted Arthur dead to save their merger and their money, but Arthur's estate was a fortress. They couldn't have just walked in at 2 a.m. unless someone turned off the alarms and unlocked the front door for them. Lucien's eyes widened. Eleanor let them in. Exactly, Mendoza confirmed, turning away from the desk and pacing toward the glass doors. They confronted Arthur. They demanded to know where the golden egg was. Arthur refused. They beat an old man to death, rupturing his spleen, and ripped that cross off his neck in the struggle, and when they realized they'd gone too far and left a bruised, battered corpse. Eleanor called her secret boyfriend. Father Diego finished, his voice trembling with anger. She called Dr. Aris to come over, stage the bed, and sign a fraudulent death certificate claiming it was a peaceful heart attack. Thank you, ladies, Mendoza called over her shoulder to the receptionists, already pushing the heavy glass doors open. You're helpful as always. They hurried back out into the sweltering heat of the parking lot. If Dr. Aris and Eleanor are running, Lucien said, jogging to keep up with Mendoza, where would they go? You grounded the private jets and the ferries are packed with tourists for the holiday. They can't get off the island. If they can't run, they're going to hide, Mendoza said, pulling open the door of the cruiser. Or they're going to try and get their hands on the one thing that can buy their way out of this mess. The egg. Mendoza slid into the driver's seat, pulled her phone from her pocket, and hit a speed dial. Rafa, Mendoza said the second the line connected. Have you reached the soup kitchen yet? We're 2 blocks away, Angie, but we are currently on foot. Rafa's voice crackled through the speaker, accompanied by a chaotic symphony of shouting voices and honking car horns. The center of the city is packed. There are people digging up the municipal flower beds with garden spades. Val is threatening to hit people with her crowbar just to clear a path on the sidewalk. Where are you? Leaving the Panorama building, Mendoza said, throwing the car into gear. Aris is gone, but we found out who the inside woman is. Eleanor and Dr. Aris are a couple. She let the board into the house and he covered up the beating. I have no idea where they would have gone, but I gotta catch them before they get to the egg. Follow the money, Rafa said firmly. What do you mean? Arthur Sterling pulled $500 million from corporate accounts to fund this golden egg hunt, Rafa explained over the noise of the crowd. You don't just put that kind of cash onto a black credit card without leaving a massive digital trace. It requires transfers, offshore trusts, and banking approvals. Eleanor managed all of his personal affairs. I bet he asked her to open the new account. Mendoza's eyes narrowed. She knows exactly which bank is holding the funds. She probably knows the account numbers, Rafa said. Right now, she's not looking for a golden egg in the dirt. She's trying to intercept the money at the source before whoever finds the egg can claim it. If you find out where that money was transferred, you'll find Eleanor. Thank you, Mendoza said. Watch your backs at the soup kitchen. We'll do our best, Rafa said with a dark chuckle before ending the call. You heard the man, Lucien, Mendoza said flatly. Does this mean you are giving me official police permission to hack into a highly secure, heavily encrypted international banking database to track Arthur Sterling's financials? Lucien asked with suspicion. Mendoza hit the siren, pulling the cruiser out of the parking lot and back onto the chaotic coastal highway. It means, Mendoza said, staring straight ahead at the road, I am going to exercise my right to plausible deniability. Get typing. Chapter 9. Talk to me, Lucien. Did you find the digital crater? I'm in the Sterling Hospitality corporate ledger, Lucien said, his voice tight with the specific anxiety of a man committing multiple federal cybercrimes from the passenger seat of a police car. Rafa was right. You don't just move $500 million without triggering a dozen automated security protocols. But Arthur was the chairman. He had the highest level of administrative clearance. 2 days ago, he authorized a massive unilateral wire transfer, completely bypassing the board of directors. Where did he send it? Mendoza asked. An offshore trust in the Caymans? A Swiss holding firm? No, Lucien frowned, squinting at the glowing screen. He transferred the entire liquid sum to the San Malvino Community Cooperative? Mendoza blinked, her foot easing up slightly on the accelerator. The what? I've never even heard of that. From the back seat, Father Diego let out a booming, delighted laugh. Oh, Arthur, you absolute genius. Father? Mendoza prompted, glancing in the rearview mirror. What is the San Malvino Community Cooperative? Is it a shell company? It's a struggling tiny local credit union on 4th Street, Father Diego said, his eyes crinkling with a mixture of grief and profound admiration. They operate out of a single storefront next to the bakery. They don't deal in corporate stocks or hedge funds. They exist strictly to give out $500 microloans so the local fishermen can repair their boat engines and issue basic debit cards for online shopping. Lucien stared at his phone in absolute shock. He put $500 million into a credit union that probably has less than $10,000 in its actual vault? Do you know what the overnight interest alone on $500 million will do for a bank that size? Father Diego asked. It will keep their doors open for the next 50 years. They'll be able to fund every small business on the island. Even while setting up this chaotic treasure hunt, Arthur made absolutely sure he was supporting the locals. And it's brilliant legally, too, Mendoza realized. If he put the money in a massive international bank, his corporate lawyers would have frozen the assets pending a judge's order in 3 hours. But a tiny, independent island credit union, they operate entirely under San Malvino local jurisdiction. Vance can't touch them without going through local courts, which takes months. Unless, Lucien pointed out nervously, Eleanor gets there first with a forged document and transfers it all right back out before the bank even realizes what's happening. Hold on, Mendoza said, hitting the siren and taking a hard, screeching right turn onto 4th Street. The San Malvino Community Cooperative was located in an old stucco building with a faded yellow awning. Even through the thick safety glass, they could hear the shouting inside. Standing at the single-teller window was Eleanor. Behind her, clutching a leather duffel bag nervously to his chest, was Dr. Eris. "Listen to me, you glorified cashier," Eleanor sneered, slamming a thick stack of legal documents onto the counter. "I am the Executive Chief of Staff for Sterling Hospitality. I have a full, legally binding power of attorney to conduct any and all financial business on behalf of Arthur Sterling. I opened this account for him in the first place. Now, wire the funds back to the corporate holding account immediately, or I will have your job, your bank, and your entire life ruined by noon." Behind the bulletproof glass, a young bank clerk wearing a name tag that read Rosa was visibly trembling. Her face was pale and she looked like she wanted to cry, but her hands remained stubbornly planted on the counter. I can't do that, ma'am," Rosa stammered, her voice shaking but resolute. "The power of attorney is legally binding," Dr. Aris yelled, his forehead dripping with sweat. "Just press the button and make the transfer." "That power of attorney is void," Rosa insisted, sliding a crisp white piece of paper back through the teller slot toward Eleanor. "Mr. Sterling came in personally on Thursday afternoon. He sat right in that chair. He hand-delivered a notarized, sworn affidavit to our branch manager." Eleanor stared at the paper, her face turning a blotchy, furious red. "What is this?" "It's a legally binding directive," Rosa said, standing a little taller. "It explicitly states that under absolutely no circumstances are we to grant account access, authorize transfers, or release any funds to Eleanor Hayes, Preston Vance, Graham Vance, or Vivian Thorne. He specifically named you, ma'am. My system literally locked me out of the account the second I typed your name in." "You little—" Eleanor raised her hand, her face twisting in pure rage as she lunged toward the glass. "That's enough!" Mendoza's voice cracked like a whip through the small lobby. Eleanor and Dr. Aris turned around. When Aris saw Mendoza, he let out a pathetic, strangled whimper and dropped his duffel bag onto the linoleum floor. "Detective Mendoza," Eleanor said, desperately trying to hold it together. "Thank goodness you're here. This bank is attempting to hold Mr. Sterling's assets hostage. I am just trying to secure his estate until—" "Save it, Eleanor," Mendoza interrupted, marching straight up to the teller counter. "The sweet lady act isn't going to work anymore. We know about your relationship with Dr. Aris, and we know Mr. Sterling's actual cause of death." Dr. Aris let out a loud sob, his knees buckling slightly. "I told you this was a bad idea, Ellie. I told you she was going to find out." "Shut up, Aris!" Eleanor hissed, shooting him a glare. Mendoza unclipped the handcuffs from her belt. "Eleanor Hayes and Dr. Aris, you are both under arrest for conspiracy, massive financial fraud, falsifying a death certificate, and the murder of Arthur Sterling." "No!" Eleanor screamed, suddenly backing away from the counter. "We didn't kill him. You can't pin that on me." "You let them into the house, Eleanor," Father Diego said. "You let the wolves into Arthur's bedroom. For 20 years he trusted you, and you betrayed him." Eleanor stared at the priest, a bitter, ugly laugh bubbling up from her throat. "Trusted me? I built his empire. I managed his life. I hid his little stealth charities from the board so he could play the benevolent savior of the island. And how does he repay me? He liquidates the accounts. He drains my severance and gives it away to a bunch of stray dogs and fishermen. I was just taking back what was rightfully mine." "So you killed him," Lucienne said, thoroughly disgusted. "I didn't touch him," Eleanor shrieked. "Graham and Preston did. They found out about the video broadcast and called me in panic. I let them in through the side gate so we could force Arthur to cancel the hunt and transfer the money back, but the stubborn old fool wouldn't break. By the time I walked into the bedroom, Arthur was already dead." She motioned at Aris. "I was the one who had to clean up their mess. I staged the bed and Aris signed the papers. We just wanted to get the money back before the rest of the island found the egg." "If you didn't kill him," Mendoza said coldly, leaning down to look Eleanor in the eye, "then you're going to spend the rest of your life in Legoland as an accessory to premeditated murder. Where are Graham and Preston Vance?" Eleanor glared up at her, a vindictive, triumphant sneer twisting her features. "You're too late, detective," Eleanor spat. "You aren't going to save Arthur's precious fortune. Graham and Preston aren't stupid. They already solved most of the clues." Mendoza didn't waste a single second. She turned to the terrified bank clerk behind the glass. "Rosa, you did a phenomenal job today. Do not unlock those doors until my uniforms arrive to collect these two." Yes, detective," Rosa squeaked, clutching the notarized letter to her chest. Chapter 10. The parish soup kitchen was a vibrant, chaotic sanctuary tucked into a narrow cobblestone street. By the time Reg squeezed his Jeep into a questionable parking spot near the back alley, the line of people waiting for the special Easter Sunday meals stretched all the way around the block. The air was thick and heavy with the mouth-watering aroma of slow-roasted pork, fried sweet plantains, and garlic. "Okay, Gary," Rafa said, stepping out of the Jeep. "Keep the metal detector turned off. We are not causing a panic in the middle of a church charity dinner." "I can be stealthy," Gary said, slinging the bright yellow machine over his shoulder like a rifle. Val grabbed her heavy iron crowbar from the back of her truck, resting it casually against her side. "Lead the way." They wove through the crowded courtyard, dodging running children and volunteers carrying stacks of folding chairs. They found the head kitchen manager, a bustling, flour-dusted woman named Maria, shouting orders over a massive vat of black beans. "Maria!" Gary called out, waving his hand. "Happy Easter!" Maria beamed, wiping her hands on her apron as she hurried over. "If you're here to help serve, grab a hairnet. We are slammed today. Mr. Sterling's delivery was a godsend, but trying to prep it all is going to be the death of me." Reg and Rafa exchanged a sharp look. "Arthur Sterling sent a delivery?" Reg asked smoothly. 2 days ago. Maria nodded, her smile turning slightly sorrowful. A massive truck backed right up to the pantry doors. Fresh mangoes, yucca, crates of tomatoes, and enough pork to feed the entire east side of the island for a month. God rest his soul. I still can't believe he passed away this morning. He was very generous, Alex agreed gently. Maria, did he happen to leave anything else? A specific box or a letter? Maria frowned, tapping her chin with a floury finger. He didn't leave a letter, but the delivery guys did drop off one heavy wooden crate. They told me Mr. Sterling left strict instructions that it was for the kids, and under absolutely no circumstances were we allowed to open it until Easter morning. Gary's eyes went wide. Where is the crate? In the back of the dry pantry. Maria pointed toward a set of heavy swinging doors. Why? We're doing a safety inspection. Rafa lied flawlessly, offering his most charming, professional smile. City mandate. We'll just take a quick peek and be out of your hair. Oh, all right, help yourselves, Maria shrugged, turning back to her boiling pots. Just don't step on the sacks of rice. The six of them practically sprinted through the swinging doors, slipping into the cool, dimly lit expanse of the dry pantry. The room was stacked to the ceiling with canned goods and bulk bags of flour. Tucked into the very back corner, sitting on a wooden pallet, was a heavy, reinforced shipping crate stamped with the Sterling Hospitality logo. Bombay sniffed it and sat next to it. Bingo, Gary whispered, taking a step forward. He reached for his metal detector. Let's see if the egg is inside. Gary, it's a sealed wooden crate, Val said, rolling her eyes affectionately. She stepped past him, wedging the flattened edge of her crowbar under the thick wooden lid. You don't need a metal detector. You just need leverage. Smart lady! Polly screeched. With a sharp, practiced motion, she popped the crate open. Gary stared at her, utterly mesmerized. You are amazing. Val blushed, wiping her hands on her overalls. Just look in the box, Gary. They gathered around the open crate. There was no golden egg. Instead, the crate was overflowing with a truckload of Easter candy, thousands of pastel jelly beans, bright yellow marshmallow chicks, and dozens of large, foil-wrapped chocolate bunnies nestled in shredded green paper grass. He really did send it for the kids, Shannon whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. He knew the island was going to go crazy looking for his fortune, but he still made sure the soup kitchen got its Easter candy. The guy had his priorities straight, Reg said, smiling. Rafa reached into the center of the crate, pushing aside a particularly large chocolate bunny, and his fingers brushed against heavy paper. He pulled out a crisp, white envelope embossed with gold foil. Got it, Rafa announced, holding the envelope up. Before he could tear it open, Reggie's cell phone buzzed in his pocket. Angela, tell me you have good news. I have Eleanor and Eris handcuffed to a waiting bench at the San Malvino Community Cooperative. Mendoza's voice crackled over the speaker, accompanied by the muffled, frantic typing of Lucienne in the background. Are they the killers? Alex gasped. More of a cleanup crew, Mendoza corrected, her voice dead serious. Eleanor was the inside woman. She let the Vances into the estate, and Dr. Aris signed the fake death certificate to cover it up. But they didn't strike the fatal blow. Rafa's jaw tightened. Who did? Preston Vance and his nephew, Graham, Mendoza said. Eleanor was just trying to transfer the money back before the treasure hunters found the egg. So those two are probably after the egg, Reg said. They are, and they are completely desperate, Mendoza added grimly. Are you close to finding the egg? Actually, it's another clue, Rafa said, ripping the gold envelope open. He pulled out the heavy cardstock. Another curveball from Arthur. Listen to this. A kingdom built on greed will fall, but faith provides a shield for all. Seek out the mother wrapped in blue and find the prize she holds for you. The mother wrapped in blue, Alex repeated, her brow furrowing. Is that a painting? It's a statue, Father Diego gasped over the phone. The mother wrapped in blue. It's the statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary in the courtyard of Nuestra Señora de las Olas. It's my parish. The egg is at the church, Gary yelled. Joy to the Lord! Polly belted off key. Angela, how far are you from the church? Reg asked. If I hit the sirens, Mendoza looked at her watch. I'll be there in 10 minutes. What time is it? Father Diego asked. It's noon, Mendoza said, confused. Why? The Easter Sunday Mass is about to end, Father Diego breathed, the horror of the realization crashing over him. The courtyard. The courtyard around the statue of the Virgin Mary. It will be full of toddlers lined up for the parish Easter egg hunt. The blood drained completely from Alex's face. Shannon covered her mouth. You're telling me, Reg said, his voice dropping, that 2 desperate murderers are currently descending on a courtyard filled with 3-year-olds in pastel dresses? Yes, Father Diego whispered. Reg, get there as soon as you can, Mendoza's voice cut back in. No one ruins the egg hunt for toddlers. Not on my watch. Chapter 11. Reg slammed the Jeep into park halfway up the curb just outside the wrought iron gates of Nuestra Señora de las Olas. The courtyard of the historic church was a picture-perfect, pastel-colored explosion of pure Easter joy. Hundreds of parishioners were milling about the sun-drenched stone plaza. Dozens of toddlers in ruffled dresses, tiny suspenders, and straw hats were sprinting across the manicured lawns, shrieking with laughter as they shoved brightly colored plastic eggs into their wicker baskets. It was loud, joyful, and completely chaotic. Okay, Reg said, killing the engine. Keep your eyes peeled. The group piled out of the Jeep. Bombay hopped down from the back seat, his tail giving a slow, happy wag at the sight of so many small children dropping half-eaten jelly beans into the grass. By the rectory wall, Rafa pointed discreetly. 3 o'clock. Standing near a row of meticulously pruned hibiscus bushes, looking entirely out of place among the cheering families, were Preston Vance, Graham Vance, and Vivian Thorne. Graham was actively tearing through a bed of lilies, his designer suit jacket discarded on the grass, his silk tie askew. Preston was furiously pacing, scanning the architectural details of the church exterior, while Vivian aggressively poked at a patch of mulch with the toe of her $1,000 high heel. They don't have it yet, Alex said with relief. But they're looking, Shannon whispered, and they don't care who sees them. You 4 find the egg, Reg said, cracking his knuckles. Rafa and I will take care of the suits. Be careful, Alex warned him. We aren't going to touch them. Reg offered a mischievous smile and patted Bombay's head. Come on, buddy, go get them. Bombay's ears perked up. He let out a sharp, enthusiastic woof and took off across the courtyard at a heavy, thundering sprint. Vivian Thorne shrieked, dropping her designer handbag and scrambling backward into the hibiscus bushes. Graham Vance let out a high-pitched yelp of pure terror. He tried to run, tripped over a decorative stone border, and fell flat on his back in the dirt, throwing his arms up over his face. Preston Vance froze, completely paralyzed by fear, pressing himself flat against the stucco wall of the rectory as Bombay skidded to a halt right in front of them. He sat down on Graham's discarded suit jacket, looked up at the 3 trembling executives, and let out a single, deafening bark. Graham whimpered. Before any of them could attempt to crawl away, Reg and Rafa flanked them, completely blocking their only path of escape. Don't move, Reg said in a menacing voice. He's trained to go for the throat if you run. He is? Graham choked out, staring at the dog in horror. Bombay panted happily, his tongue lolling out the side of his mouth. The wail of a police siren suddenly ripped through the air. Mendoza's mud-splattered cruiser jumped the curb, flashing its lights as it screeched to a halt right next to Reg's Jeep. Detective Mendoza, call off this animal immediately, Preston Vance yelled. We are simply attending Easter services. Save it, Preston, Mendoza snapped, stepping right up to the terrified lawyer. Eleanor is already in handcuffs, and Dr. Eris sang like a canary. We know exactly what happened in Arthur's bedroom last night. All the blood drained from Preston's face. Vivian let out a soft, horrified gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Graham Vance, Mendoza continued coldly, grabbing the young executive by the arm and hauling him roughly to his feet. You are under arrest for the murder of Arthur Sterling. Preston and Vivian, you are under arrest for conspiracy and accessory to murder. Lucien, cuff them. As Lucien and Mendoza led the three execs to the cruiser, the courtyard became completely engulfed by a swarm of toddlers. "We have to hurry," Shannon said as a 4-year-old in a yellow dress bumped into her knee, proudly showing off a plastic egg. "If Arthur hid the golden egg here, one of these kids is going to find it and try to eat it." "Let's read the clue again," Val said, her eyes scanning the courtyard. Rafa had handed the gold-embossed card to Shannon. She read it aloud, raising her voice to be heard over the joyful screaming of the children. "A kingdom built on greed will fall, but faith provides a shield for all. Seek out the mother wrapped in blue and find the prize she holds for you." "The mother wrapped in blue," Alex repeated, turning slowly in a circle. "The statue of the Virgin Mary." They all turned to look at the center of the courtyard. Rising from a bed of white lilies was a life-sized, beautifully carved marble statue of Our Lady of the Sea. Her robes were painted a brilliant, vibrant shade of cobalt blue. Her stone face looked down with a gentle, serene smile. Her arms were extended outward, offering a beautifully carved marble basket overflowing with sculpted stone fish. "She is so beautiful," Shannon breathed, stepping toward the statue. Dozens of children were swarming around their legs, digging through the lilies for plastic eggs, entirely oblivious to the group of adults staring intently at the marble figure. "But where is it?" Val asked, frowning. "She's solid stone. There are no loose bricks around the base, and there's no plaque to pry off like at the lighthouse." "Maybe he buried it right underneath her?" Shannon suggested. "Should we get the shovels?" "No," Gary said suddenly. Alex looked at him. "No?" Gary stepped closer to the statue, tilting his head as he looked up at the Virgin Mary's extended arms. A slow, massive grin spread across his face. "You know what they say," Gary said, his eyes twinkling with sheer delight. "Don't keep all your eggs in one basket." He pointed directly at the marble basket of fish resting in the statue's hands. Val blinked. She looked at Gary, looked at the basket, and gasped. "No way!" She stepped over the low decorative stone border, being careful not to step on any lilies, and reached into the carved marble basket, her fingers slipping between the stone fish. Her hand stopped. "It's here," Val whispered, her voice tight with awe. She pulled her hand back out. Resting in the center of her palm was a heavy, perfectly smooth, solid gold egg. It gleamed in the midday sun, catching the light. Gary let out a loud, triumphant cheer. "You found it!" Shannon gasped, clapping her hands over her mouth. "We did it!" Alex cheered. "We actually beat them to it!" Val stepped back over the flowers and held the golden egg out toward the group. It was surprisingly large, about the size of a mango, and had a very fine seam running around its center. "Open it," Gary urged, practically vibrating with excitement. Val twisted the top half of the egg. With a soft, metallic click, it unlatched. She pulled the two halves apart. Nestled inside a bed of black velvet was a sleek, matte black credit card. Tucked underneath the card was a small flash drive and a thick, folded piece of heavy parchment paper. Gary stared at the black card, his eyes wide. $500 million. Right there. Polly did a little jig on his shoulder. "We're rich, baby." Chapter 12. The grand auditorium of San Malvino Town Hall was packed to absolute capacity. Hundreds of islanders were crammed into the folding chairs and lining the walls. Most of them were still covered in dirt, clutching garden spades, flashlights, and in one memorable case, a heavily dented post-hole digger. Reg, Alex, Rafa, Shannon, Lucien, Gary, and Val occupied the front row. Bombay was sprawled comfortably across Reg and Alex's feet, completely indifferent to the tense, exhausted energy vibrating through the room. Gary was still wearing his tactical cargo vest, holding his yellow metal detector upright like a ceremonial staff. "Good morning," Mendoza's voice echoed through the speakers. "I'm going to make this very brief. The Arthur Sterling Easter egg hunt is officially over." A collective, heartbroken groan rolled through the auditorium. Someone in the back yelled, "Did someone from the mainland find it?" "Nobody from the mainland found it," Mendoza snapped, leaning closer to the microphone. "It was found by a local rigger, Valeria dos Santos, and because of that, Arthur Sterling's final wishes remain legally intact. I'm turning the floor over to our digital forensics specialist, Officer Carter, to explain the rest. Lucien, looking significantly more rested than he had yesterday, walked up to the podium. He hooked a laptop into the projector system and held up a small flash drive. "We found this inside the golden egg, along with a black credit card," Lucien said, tapping a few keys. "Mr. Sterling left a pre-recorded message for whoever solved his riddles." Lucien hit play. The massive projector screen behind him flickered to life. Arthur Sterling appeared on the screen. He was sitting in his private study, wearing a crisp suit. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear, calm, and entirely at peace. "If you are watching this," Arthur's voice filled the silent auditorium, "then you have followed the path of faith and charity, not the path of greed. You solved the riddles, and you hold the golden egg. You are now the steward of the San Malvino Trust." Gary sat up a little straighter in his folding chair, glancing proudly at Val. "I had to do this in secret," Arthur continued on the screen, a shadow crossing his face. "Because the rot was inside my own house. My VP, my lawyer, the director of my foundation, and the assistant I trusted for 20 years. They cared more about a corporate buyout than they cared about this community. The flash drive holding this video also contains the unredacted corporate ledgers. It proves their embezzlement, their fraud, and their threats against my life. Give it to the authorities. Make sure they never hurt this island again." On the stage, Mendoza offered a grim, satisfied nod. The files Lucien had pulled from that drive were already sitting on the district attorney's desk. "As for the fortune," Arthur said, his expression softening, "the black card inside the egg does not contain my net worth. The bulk of my wealth has already been locked into an irrevocable trust. It will provide continuous, monthly, fully funded support to the San Malvino Animal Shelter, the Soup Kitchen, and the Historical Society. Rosa, the brilliant clerk at the Community Cooperative Bank, has the finalized list of the other 30 local beneficiaries." A quiet murmur of awe swept through the crowd. "Now," Arthur said, offering a wry, deeply knowing smile to the camera, "I know human nature, and I know San Malvino. I know that by the time you found the egg and played this video, a mob of you have likely taken a pickaxe to my casino fountain, dug up the botanical gardens, and destroyed most of the municipal property." A few people in the audience nervously hid their shovels behind their legs. "Please forgive an old man his theatricality," Arthur chuckled softly. "A designated, fully funded renovation account has already been cleared at the bank to repair all public and private property damage caused by this hunt." At the podium, Mendoza closed her eyes and let out a sigh of relief. Rafa chuckled quietly from the front row. "Finally," Arthur said, looking directly into the camera lens with absolute sincerity, "to the steward who found the egg, I promised a reward, and the black card is yours. It is tied to a lifetime stipend of $5,000 a month. It isn't enough to corrupt you, but it is enough to give you freedom. Travel, start a business, protect our island. May God bless you all." The screen faded to black. For a moment, the town hall was completely silent. Then, starting from the back row and rolling forward like a wave, the room erupted into thunderous, deafening applause. In the front row, Gary stared blankly at the dark screen, his jaw hanging slightly open. He slowly turned his head to look at Val. $5,000 a month, Gary whispered, doing the math in his head. "For the rest of your life, you're the steward." "Gary," Val said, her eyes shining, "I can buy the boat. I can get the bank loan tomorrow. I can actually buy my own commercial fishing boat." "I think Arthur would be thrilled to know the stipend went to a future ship's captain," Alex said. Val let out a shaky laugh, rubbing her eyes with the back of her wrist. Without thinking about it, she reached out and pulled Gary into a tight, fierce hug. Gary froze for a fraction of a second, his face turning bright red before happily hugging her back. Shannon nudged Lucien and whispered, "I give it 2 weeks before he proposes." "I give it 10 days, Lucien whispered back. Chapter 13. The evening breeze rolled across Alex and Reggie's porch, cooling everyone present. The pastel-colored chaos of the weekend had finally faded, leaving behind the comforting, quiet hum of a normal San Malvino night. Bombay was sprawled on his back in the middle of the porch, all four paws in the air, snoring softly. Lucien sat on the porch stairs, carefully peeling the gold foil off a large chocolate bunny. He stared at it with profound reverence before cleanly biting off both of its ears. "I have waited 48 hours for this," Lucien mumbled happily around a mouthful of chocolate. "It tastes like victory and uninterrupted sleep." "You earned it, kid," Rafa said, leaning back in his chair with a glass of rum resting on his knee. Though I have to admit, Arthur Sterling certainly gave a whole new meaning to the phrase eccentric billionaire. "No kidding," Gary said, sitting next to Val on the porch swing. Polly the parrot was perched proudly on Gary's shoulder, happily crunching on a cashew. Usually, when a billionaire gets eccentric, they buy a social media platform or try to build a rocket ship. They don't turn a Caribbean island into a giant, scripture-based escape room to fund a soup kitchen. "It was brilliant, though," Shannon smiled, tucking her feet underneath her. "He outsmarted his entire corporate board from beyond the grave." Reg took a sip of his beer and looked across the porch at Val. The tough, canvas-wearing rigger looked completely relaxed, leaning comfortably against the back of the swing, her boots propped up on the railing. "I have to ask, Val," Reg said smoothly. "Are you disappointed? You found the golden egg expecting to find $500 million, and instead, you got a $5,000 a month allowance. That's quite a pay cut." Val let out a rich, genuine laugh that startled Polly into a happy little chirp. "Disappointed?" Val shook her head. "Reg, it is the biggest relief of my life. If I had suddenly inherited $500 million, I wouldn't have the faintest idea what to do with it. You can't just go back to the docks and haul lines when you're richer than the GDP of a small country. It puts a massive target on your back." "She's right," Rafa nodded in agreement. "Money like that changes everyone around you." "Exactly," Val said, taking a sip of her margarita. "But $5,000 a month? That's freedom. It's exactly enough to go to the bank tomorrow, take out a commercial loan, and buy my own fishing boat. I don't have to change who I am. I just get to be the captain now." Gary beamed, looking at her with such pure, unfiltered adoration that Alex had to bite the inside of her cheek to stop from smiling too widely. "I'll drink to that," Reg said, raising his bottle. "There is something profoundly liberating about being firmly in the middle class. At least when you're broke, nobody is trying to beat you to death for your 401k. "Middle-class survival," Polly squawked from Gary's shoulder, flapping his wings. "Buy a boat, Val." "I just wish he hadn't been so theatrical about it," Mendoza said, staring at her beer label. "If Arthur Sterling had just walked into my station the second he started receiving anonymous death threats, he might still be alive today. I would have put a patrol car outside his estate and locked Preston and Graham Vance in a holding cell for extortion." "He probably didn't think you could protect him," Alex said gently. "From a couple of corporate executives?" Mendoza scoffed. "Please." "It's not about your capability," Alex explained, resting a hand on Reggie's arm. "People with that level of extreme wealth are incredibly isolated. They live in echo chambers. Arthur spent his whole life surrounded by people who only wanted something from him. His board, his lawyers, his foundation directors. When you live like that, paranoia becomes your baseline. He probably didn't believe anyone would help him without an ulterior motive, not even the police." "Alex is right," Father Diego said. The priest had stopped by to drop off a tray of leftover Easter pastries and was currently scratching Bombay behind the ears. Arthur didn't trust the system anymore. The scavenger hunt was the only way he felt he could truly control the outcome. "Well, it worked," Lucien said, holding up the half-eaten chocolate bunny. "The money is safe, the charities are funded, and the bad guys are in Legoland. Case closed." "Just out of curiosity," Rafa said with a grin. "When is the next major public holiday on this island?" Shannon pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. Technically, the San Malvino Founders' Day Parade is in about 6 weeks." Rafa nodded slowly, processing the information. "Noted. I will make sure to buy a ferry ticket back to Cuba for that exact week." Lucien pointed his chocolate bunny at Rafa. Take me with you. I can't survive another festive holiday in this town. Nobody is going to Cuba, Mendoza said, pretending to be serious. You're all staying right here. Who else is going to help me arrest the tourists when they inevitably try to steal the parade floats? That sounds like a you problem, Detective, Reg chuckled, raising his beer. To Arthur, Val said softly, lifting her glass into the center of the group. A very weird guy, but a pretty great shepherd. To Arthur, the porch echoed in unison. This has been Death by Easter Hunt, a hilarious feel-good cozy mystery, book 26 in the Island Whodunit series, written by Tess Marlowe.
Thank you for listening to Death by Easter Hunt. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next mystery. See you on San Malvino.